Millions of people around the world have been reading Psalm 23 their entire lives. They recite it at funerals, whisper it in hospital rooms, and repeat it in moments of fear, as if the words themselves are meant to soothe the pain away. Yet here is the uncomfortable truth. Most of those people never actually live in the power of Psalm 23. They know the words, but they do not experience the authority behind them. They can quote it, but their lives are still dominated by fear, anxiety, and constant inner unrest. This creates a painful contradiction. How can someone believe in God, read Scripture faithfully, and still feel overwhelmed by life? How can faith coexist with constant worry about money, health, relationships, and the future? Many believers quietly carry this question, but few dare to say it out loud. They assume something must be wrong with them. They think they do not have enough faith, or that they are failing spiritually. But what if the problem is not your faith at all? What if the problem is not Psalm 23 either? What if the real issue is that there is a hidden secret inside this psalm that most people have never been taught to see? Not a new revelation, not a modern idea, but a truth that has been there all along. The words are familiar, but the understanding is not. And that misunderstanding has cost people their peace, their confidence, and their courage. For most people, Psalm 23 has been reduced to something gentle and sentimental. It is often read like a comforting poem, something soft and emotional meant to calm the heart when life feels heavy. Others treat it like a lullaby for the soul, something you return to only when you feel weak, broken, or afraid. In this version, the psalm becomes passive. It is something you cling to while you endure life, not something that actively shapes how you live it. But this understanding ignores a critical detail. David did not write Psalm 23 from a place of safety or ease. He was not sheltered from danger, nor was he removed from conflict. David was a warrior long before he was a king. He lived in a world of real threats, real enemies, and real consequences. His life was marked by battles, betrayal, and constant uncertainty. This raises a powerful question. Why would a man like that write something so bold, so confident, and so absolute? Why would a fighter, a survivor, and a ruler choose these words? Psalm 23 does not sound like someone trying to comfort himself. It sounds like someone making a declaration. It sounds like someone who knows exactly where he stands and who is standing with him. That alone should make us pause and reconsider everything we think we know about this psalm. If Psalm 23 was never meant to simply make you feel better, then what was it meant to do? What if its true purpose is not emotional relief, but internal transformation? What if it was written to change how you face reality rather than how you escape from it? Most people read Scripture hoping it will remove discomfort. They want peace without pressure and comfort without confrontation. But Psalm 23 does something far more challenging. It does not promise the absence of valleys. It does not suggest a life without enemies. Instead, it speaks with certainty in the middle of danger. It assumes hardship as part of the journey. So here is the question that will guide everything that follows. If Psalm 23 is not about feeling safe, but about living fearless, then how have you been reading it wrong? If it is not meant to quiet your emotions, but to strengthen your stance, then what have you been missing every time you heard it read? And if this psalm was designed to reshape how you see God, yourself, and your circumstances, then what would change if you finally understood it the way David intended? This video is an invitation to slow down and look again. We are going to walk through Psalm 23 line by line, not rushing past familiar words and not assuming we already understand them. Each verse will be explored through its original Jewish context, through real human experience, and through its relevance to modern life. This will not be shallow inspiration or religious noise. It will not rely on cliches or emotional manipulation, and it will not reduce Scripture to motivational language. The goal is much deeper than that. The goal is clarity, Truth has a way of cutting through confusion and changing how you live from the inside out. If you have ever believed in God but still felt overwhelmed by life, this journey is for you. If you have ever recited Psalm 23 without feeling its power, this journey is for you. By the end, you may discover that nothing was missing from the psalm at all. The only thing missing was the way it was meant to be understood. In modern culture, the word shepherd usually brings to mind a peaceful and gentle image. We imagine quiet fields, soft grass, and a calm figure standing watch while sheep graze without danger. The shepherd is often portrayed as kind, passive, and almost decorative, someone whose role is simply to be present rather than to act. This image has shaped how many people understand the opening line of Psalm 23, and it has quietly weakened its meaning. But this modern picture has very little to do with the world in which the psalm was written. In biblical culture, a shepherd was not gentle in the way we imagine today. A shepherd was a frontline protector. He lived with the sheep day and night, exposed to the same weather, the same terrain, and the same dangers. His job was not to create a pleasant atmosphere. His job was to make sure the sheep survived. The ancient shepherd did not avoid conflict. He expected it. Wild animals were not rare threats but constant realities. Thieves did not politely stay away but actively looked for opportunities. A shepherd understood that violence was sometimes the only barrier between life and death. Protecting the flock meant being willing to confront danger head-on, even when the odds were against him. This changes everything about how we read the words, "The Lord is my shepherd." David was not describing God as someone who simply makes him feel calm. He was describing God as someone who takes full responsibility for his safety. A shepherd in biblical times was accountable for every sheep under his care. If one was lost, injured, or killed, the shepherd answered for it. That responsibility demanded strength, courage, and a willingness to fight. When David chose this word, he was making a bold statement about the kind of God he trusted. To understand the weight of this image, we have to understand what a shepherd actually carried and what he actually faced. A shepherd was armed, not symbolically, but practically. He carried a rod, a solid weapon used to strike predators at close range. He carried a staff, long and strong, used not only for guidance but for control and rescue. Many shepherds also carried a sling, a deadly tool in skilled hands, capable of stopping an attacker from a distance. These were not ceremonial objects. They were tools of survival. A shepherd did not hope danger would pass him by. He prepared for it. Lions were real threats, not metaphors. Bears were not stories, but enemies that had to be confronted. Thieves did not negotiate. They attacked when the opportunity appeared. In these moments, the shepherd did not have the option to run. Running meant abandoning the flock, and abandoning the flock meant failure. There was no concept of retreat in the role of a true shepherd. His calling demanded that he stand his ground. If a predator came, the shepherd moved toward the danger, not away from it. The sheep depended entirely on his willingness to put himself in harm's way. Their safety was inseparable from his courage. This is the context David was drawing from. When he said, "The Lord is my shepherd," he was not using poetic exaggeration. He was using lived experience. He understood the cost of protection. He understood what it meant to stay when leaving would have been safer. By choosing this image, David was declaring that God does not watch from a distance. God does not send comfort while avoiding conflict. God steps into the threat itself. Seen this way, the opening line of Psalm 23 is no longer gentle or passive. It is strong, confrontational, and deeply personal. It declares that the one who watches over David is not afraid of what threatens him. It declares that God does not negotiate with danger. He confronts it. And that single sentence sets the foundation for everything that follows in the psalm. David was not speaking from theory when he chose the words, "The Lord is my shepherd." He was speaking from memory, muscle, and scars. Young boy, long before crowns and palaces, David lived alone in the fields with sheep that were not his own. Those sheep were weak, slow, and defenseless, and every danger in the wilderness knew it. Predators did not hesitate, and thieves did not ask permission. When danger came, there was no army to call, no walls to hide behind, and no second chances. David stood between life and death with nothing but his body, his tools, and his willingness to fight. He learned early that protecting sheep meant risking everything. When a lion attacked, he did not run. When a bear came, he did not freeze. He grabbed the threat and fought until either the sheep survived or he did not. That kind of responsibility changes a person. It teaches you that protection is not a feeling. It is a decision. It teaches you that love often looks like standing your ground when every instinct tells you to escape. This is why the phrase, "my shepherd," carries so much weight. David knew exactly what a shepherd owed his sheep because he had paid that price himself. When he said, "The Lord is my shepherd," he was placing his own life into God's hands with full awareness of what that meant. He was not asking God to be kind. He was trusting God to be committed. He was declaring that his survival, his future, and his battles were no longer his responsibility alone. That statement is an act of total surrender. It is not poetic. It is dangerous. To call God your shepherd is to say that you will no longer live as if everything depends on your strength. It is to accept that someone stronger is now accountable for you, just as David once was accountable for every sheep under his care. This understanding transforms how the psalm speaks to everyday life. If the Lord is truly your shepherd, then you are not required to protect yourself at all costs. You do not have to live in constant defense mode, always anticipating attack, betrayal, or failure. You do not have to exhaust yourself trying to control every outcome or prove your worth. It also means you are not fighting your battles alone. The pressure to always be strong, always be ready, and always be in control begins to loosen. You can stand firm without being frantic. You can move forward without being driven by fear. Trusting God as shepherd does not remove challenges, but it does remove the loneliness of facing them by yourself. When you stop living as your own protector, you make room for peace that does not depend on circumstances. You begin to understand that strength does not come from gripping tighter, but from releasing control. That is the freedom hidden inside David's words, and it is still available to anyone willing to trust them. For many people, the phrase, "I shall not want," is one of the most misunderstood lines in all of Psalm 23. Over time, it has been flattened into something shallow and misleading. Some hear it and immediately think about material wealth, assuming it means God will make sure you always have money, possessions, or comfort. Others interpret it as ambition, believing it promises success, recognition, or a life without struggle. Both readings miss the heart of what David was actually saying. In the world David lived in, want did not mean desire. It meant lack. It described a condition where something essential was missing. When David said, "I shall not want," he was not claiming that his life would be easy or abundant by human standards. He was declaring that nothing necessary for his purpose would be withheld. This was not about luxury. It was about sufficiency. It was not about getting everything you crave. It was about never being deprived of what you need to become who you were created to be. This distinction matters because many people measure their lives by comparison. They look at what others have and conclude that they themselves are lacking. That sense of lack slowly turns into frustration, jealousy, and fear. But David was not comparing his life to anyone else. He was anchoring his confidence in the character of his shepherd. His statement was not focused on circumstances. It was focused on trust. The original Hebrew meaning behind this line carries the idea of not being deficient for the task assigned to you. It speaks to destiny rather than desire. There is a profound difference between what you want and what you need. What you want often changes with mood, pressure, or comparison. Need is shaped by calling. God does not promise to satisfy every impulse, but He does commit to supplying every requirement necessary for you to walk the path set before you. This understanding reshapes how you see your life. You may not have everything you imagine you should have by now. You may feel behind, overlooked, or underprepared. But lack is not defined by absence. It is defined by assignment. If you are still breathing, still moving forward, and still being called, then you have not been abandoned or forgotten. You have exactly what is required for this season, even if it does not look the way you expected. Anxiety often enters when this truth is forgotten. Worry about money, time, and energy is rarely about numbers. It is about fear that you will not be able to handle what lies ahead. People panic because they believe the future depends entirely on their own strength, intelligence, or resources. That kind of pressure is crushing, and it produces constant mental unrest. This is why Jesus later spoke about worry in Matthew chapter 6. He pointed to birds that do not store food and flowers that do not labor, yet they are sustained. His message was not about passivity, it was about priority. When you forget who is leading you, you begin to believe that everything depends on you. Anxiety becomes a symptom of spiritual amnesia. It reveals that, in that moment, you have stopped seeing God as shepherd and started treating yourself as the sole provider. When you remember who is guiding your life, worry begins to lose its grip. This does not mean challenges disappear. It means they no longer define you. You stop measuring your worth by what you have and start measuring your confidence by who is leading. Trust shifts your focus from scarcity to purpose. In practical terms, this changes how you respond when fear rises. When you feel anxious, the issue is not that you are missing something. It is that you have momentarily forgotten who is directing your steps. Returning to the truth of the Lord as shepherd reorients your heart. It reminds you that provision flows from guidance, not panic. Living in this awareness brings freedom. You no longer chase security as if it is fragile. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to control outcomes you were never meant to manage alone. You learn to move forward with steadiness instead of urgency. "I shall not want" becomes more than a comforting phrase. It becomes a foundation for how you face life, grounded in trust that the one who leads you will never send you where his provision cannot sustain you. To understand this line, you have to stop thinking like a modern reader and start thinking like a shepherd. Sheep do not lie down easily. They are naturally anxious animals, constantly alert to their surroundings. A sheep will only lie down when very specific conditions are met. If it is hungry, it will remain standing and restless. If it is thirsty, it will keep moving in search of water. If it senses danger, even at a distance, its body stays tense and ready to flee. And if there is tension within the flock, competition or conflict, rest becomes impossible. For a sheep, lying down is not a choice, it is a response to safety. Rest only happens when every perceived threat has been addressed. That is why this line is so powerful. David is not saying that he forces himself to rest. He is saying that rest is the result of the shepherd's work. The shepherd removes the reasons for fear, and only then does the sheep lie down. This reveals something essential about the nature of God's care. The shepherd does not demand rest from anxious sheep. He creates the conditions that make rest possible. He deals with hunger before exhaustion sets in. He leads to water before dehydration weakens the body. He confronts danger before panic takes over. And he brings order to the flock before internal conflict destroys peace. Rest is not commanded. It is produced. The order matters. The shepherd does not say, "Relax and I will protect you later." He protects first. He does not say, "Calm down and then I will provide." He provides first. This sequence exposes a deep misunderstanding many people carry. In modern life, rest is often treated as a reward. You rest after you finish. You rest after you prove yourself. You rest when everything is finally under control. But that kind of rest rarely comes, because control is an illusion. It is revealing a different reality. In God's design, rest is not the result of control, it is the result of trust. The shepherd handles what the sheep cannot, so the sheep can do what it was created to do. This is a lesson modern people desperately need. We live in a culture that celebrates constant movement, constant productivity, and constant alertness. Being busy is praised as virtue. Being exhausted is worn like a badge of honor. The human nervous system was never designed to live in permanent emergency mode, yet many people do exactly that. They wake up tense, move through the day braced for impact, and fall asleep still carrying unresolved stress. Over time, this constant state of alert becomes normal. People forget what peace feels like. They confuse rest with laziness and stillness with weakness. Psalm 23 offers a radical alternative. It presents rest as a spiritual state, not a scheduling issue. The green pastures are not just a location, they are a condition of the soul. When David says he makes me lie down, he is acknowledging that rest sometimes requires permission. Some people do not know how to stop striving unless they are assured that someone else is watching the horizon. This is where faith and the nervous system intersect. When you believe you are alone in protecting your life, your body stays tense. Your mind keeps scanning for threats. But when you trust that someone stronger is guarding you, your system begins to reset. Breathing slows, thoughts settle, the constant internal noise starts to quiet down. Psalm 23 functions like a reset system because it reassigns responsibility. It reminds you that you were never meant to carry everything by yourself. Rest, then, is not an escape from responsibility. It is a response to protection. It is not quitting. It is consenting to be cared for. Many people fear rest because they believe everything will fall apart if they stop pushing. But sheep do not protect the flock by staying awake all night. That is the shepherd's role. The sheep's role is to trust enough to lie down. In everyday life, this truth challenges how you interpret exhaustion. Constant fatigue is not always a sign of hard work. Sometimes it is a sign of misplaced responsibility. When you live as if everything depends on you, rest feels dangerous. When you live knowing you are guided and guarded, rest becomes natural. Choosing rest is not giving up. It is declaring trust. It is saying, I am not abandoning my calling. I am acknowledging that I am not the one holding everything together. When you allow yourself to lie down, you are not stepping away from faith. You are stepping into it. Green pastures are not earned through striving. They are entered through trust. And when you finally stop fighting to stay standing, you may discover that the shepherd has already handled the dangers you were bracing yourself against. Rest becomes possible not because life is easy, but because you are protected. When most people hear the phrase, "He restores my soul," they immediately think of healing. They imagine God comforting them, soothing emotional wounds, or helping them feel better after pain. While healing is certainly part of the picture, it is not the full meaning of what David was saying. The word restore carries far more weight than simple relief. In its original sense, it means to bring back, to recover, to retrieve something that was lost and return it to where it belongs. This is not the language of surface repair. It is the language of recovery and return. David is describing a God who does not merely patch you up and send you back into life unchanged. He is describing a shepherd who goes after what has wandered off, what has been stolen, or what has been broken by the journey. Restore means that something that once belonged to you is reclaimed. It means that what life took from you does not have the final say. Life has a way of stripping people down. Over time, many lose parts of themselves without even realizing it. Faith can erode after disappointment. Innocence can disappear after betrayal. Dreams can quietly die under the weight of responsibility and repeated failure. Identity can become blurred after years of living to survive instead of living with purpose. People learn how to function, but they forget who they were before fear took control. These losses rarely happen all at once. They happen slowly. Compromise at a time, one heartbreak at a time, one season of disappointment layered on top of another. Eventually, a person wakes up and realizes that something essential is missing. They are still present, still breathing, still moving forward, but they no longer feel whole. They assume this is just what adulthood looks like. They tell themselves this is normal, but David refuses to accept that version of life. When David says, "He restores my soul," he is saying that God is not only interested in where you are going, but also in who you have lost along the way. Restoration is not about going back to who you were in ignorance. It is about being brought back to who you were created to be, with wisdom added rather than innocence erased. The shepherd does not shame the sheep for wandering. He brings it home. This truth is powerfully illustrated in the life of Peter. Peter was bold, passionate, and outspoken, yet fear exposed his weakness. In a moment of pressure, he denied knowing Jesus 3 times. Those denials were not just mistakes. They shattered Peter's self-image. He had believed himself to be loyal and courageous, and suddenly that belief collapsed. Guilt followed. Shame took root. Peter did not just fail publicly. He lost confidence in who he thought he was. What makes Peter's story remarkable is what happens next. Jesus does not discard him. He does not minimize the failure, and he does not erase the past. Instead, he restores Peter in direct proportion to the damage. 3 denials are met with 3 moments of recommissioning. Peter is not merely forgiven, he is reinstated. The very place of his greatest failure becomes the foundation of his calling. This is what restoration looks like. God does not pretend the fall never happened. He redeems it. He transforms what once disqualified you into the very thing that qualifies you to help others. Peter's brokenness becomes his authority. His shame becomes his testimony. His collapse becomes the doorway to leadership. This is why restoration is more than healing. Healing closes wounds. Restoration returns purpose. Healing stops the bleeding. Restoration brings back direction. David understood this deeply. He knew that surviving was not the same as living. He knew that a soul could be alive and still be lost. The application is deeply personal. If you feel like parts of you are missing, it does not mean you are broken beyond repair. It means you are not finished yet. You are not defective. You are not disqualified. You are not forgotten. You are simply waiting to be brought back. The shepherd does not abandon what belongs to him. He restores it. And restoration is not rushed. It happens in relationship, in safety, and in time. When David says he restores my soul, he is declaring that no loss is permanent when placed in the hands of God. You are not ruined. You are not too far gone. You are not living on borrowed time. You are being retrieved. And when the shepherd brings you back, he does not return you empty. He returns you whole, carrying not just who you were, but who you were always meant to become. One of the most honest moments in Psalm 23 appears when David speaks about the valley of the shadow of death. What is striking is not only what he says, but what he does not say. David does not say, "If I walk through the valley." He says, "Though I walk through it." That single word changes everything. It removes uncertainty about whether hardship will come and replaces it with certainty that it will. David does not present suffering as a possibility reserved for the faithless or the weak. He presents it as a guaranteed part of the journey. Faith, in his understanding, is not a shield that keeps life from hurting. It is a lens that helps you interpret the pain when it arrives. This honesty is essential because false expectations destroy trust. When people believe that faith should prevent hardship, they feel betrayed when hardship comes. David refuses to build faith on denial. By acknowledging the valley, David anchors belief in reality. He does not minimize darkness or pretend it is not frightening. He simply refuses to let it define the story. The presence of the valley does not mean God has failed or disappeared. It means the path has led through difficult terrain. Faith does not eliminate the valley. It gives you a way to walk through it without losing yourself. The valley represents seasons when clarity disappears. It is not just about physical death. It is about moments when the future feels obscured and direction is uncertain. Illness can turn the body into unfamiliar territory. Crisis can shake the foundations you once relied on. There are seasons when nothing seems to make sense, when plans collapse, and when answers feel distant. In these moments, people often describe feeling trapped. The valley is narrow, confining, and dark. Vision is limited. You cannot see what lies ahead, and you cannot return to what lies behind. Every step requires effort and trust. These are the seasons that test belief at its deepest level, not because God is absent, but because his presence is harder to perceive. David's choice of words reveals something profound. A shadow only exists when there is light somewhere nearby. Total darkness has no shadows. The valley of the shadow of death is not a place of complete abandonment. It is a place where danger feels real, but destruction is not absolute. The shadow may loom large, but it is not the final reality. This understanding reframes how you experience crisis. The valley is not a sign that you are off course. It may be confirmation that you are still moving forward. Some paths cannot be taken without passing through difficult terrain. Growth often requires descent before ascent. Transformation often begins in places where certainty ends. Many people try to avoid valleys at all costs. They numb themselves, distract themselves, or rush themselves through pain without processing it. David does none of these. He walks. He does not run. He does not freeze. He continues moving, step by step, through uncertainty. That movement itself is an act of faith. Dark seasons do not mean God has stepped away. They mean you are in a place where trust must deepen beyond sight. The valley does not cancel the shepherd. It reveals how closely he walks, and though the shadow may be long, it does not have the authority to stop the journey. Something subtle but powerful happens in the middle of this valley. Without warning, David changes the way he speaks. Up to this point, he has been talking about God. He says, "He leads me, he restores me, he makes me lie down." But in the valley, the language shifts. David stops talking about God and starts talking to him. He moves from he to you. This change is not poetic decoration. It reveals a spiritual reality. When life is comfortable, God can remain a concept. He can be discussed, analyzed, and described at a distance. Faith stays intellectual, but when darkness closes in, theory collapses. In moments of fear and uncertainty, God can no longer remain an idea. He becomes personal or he becomes irrelevant. The valley forces this transition. When you cannot see the path ahead, information is no longer enough. You do not need explanations, you need presence. David does not say the valley becomes easier. He does not say the danger disappears. He says, "You are with me." That single statement carries the weight of survival. Presence changes the experience of pain. The same valley that terrifies a person walking alone becomes bearable when someone walks beside them. This is why many people experience the deepest form of faith not in moments of celebration, but in moments of crisis. The valley strips away performance. It removes distractions. It leaves only what is real. God stops being a topic and becomes a companion. Prayer stops being formal and becomes honest. Faith stops being inherited and becomes personal. Walking with God in the valley does not mean fear vanishes. It means fear no longer dominates. David admits the shadow is there, but he refuses to let it rule his response. The presence of God reframes the moment. The darkness does not have the final word because God is closer than the threat. This closeness is expressed through the rod and the staff. These are not symbolic decorations. They are tools with purpose. The rod represents protection. It was used to strike predators, to defend the flock from real danger. In the valley, when threats feel overwhelming, the rod reminds you that you are not defenseless. You are guarded by a strength that is not your own. The staff represents guidance. It was used to keep sheep on the path, to pull them back when they wandered too close to danger, and to lift them when they fell. Part is uncomfortable because guidance often feels like resistance. Sometimes the shepherd pulls you away from what you think you need. Sometimes he redirects you when your instincts say keep going. In the valley, protection and guidance work together. God is not only fighting what threatens you, he is also shaping where you go next. Some of the resistance you feel is not opposition, it is correction. Some of the delays are not punishment. They are protection you do not yet understand. David says these tools comfort him, not because they make life easy, but because they prove he is not alone and not abandoned. Even when the path does not make sense, the shepherd's presence does. And in the deepest darkness, that presence is enough to keep moving forward. This line marks a dramatic shift in the imagery of Psalm 23. The danger has not disappeared. The enemies have not been removed. Yet something unexpected happens. In the middle of ongoing threat, a table is prepared. This is not a promise that opposition will vanish. It is a declaration that provision does not depend on the absence of conflict. Many people assume victory means silence from enemies and peace without resistance. David presents a different reality. God does not always eliminate the threat. Instead, he sustains you in its presence. You are not starving while waiting for safety. You are being fed while surrounded by pressure. This kind of confidence is unsettling to those who oppose you, because it reveals that their presence does not control your outcome. The table is prepared before the battle is finished. That detail matters. It means your strength is restored in advance. You are not fighting on empty. You are not scrambling to survive. You are nourished with intention. While others expect you to collapse, you are being strengthened. The enemy sees that you are not weakened by fear, and that is often more threatening than retaliation. Eating in the presence of enemies carries cultural weight. In ancient times, sharing a meal symbolized peace, honor, and acceptance. To eat calmly while enemies watch is a statement of unshakable security. It says you are not rushed, not frantic, and not desperate. It declares that your future is settled, even if the present is contested. This is public restoration. God does not always heal in private. Sometimes he chooses to restore you openly. The same people who doubted you are forced to witness your stability. The same voices that predicted your failure watch as you remain standing. Promotion happens where resistance once stood. Honor appears where rejection tried to define you. This kind of victory cannot be explained away. It is visible. It is undeniable. When God prepares a table, it is not hidden in a corner. It is placed where it can be seen. This is not about revenge. It is about testimony. Your life becomes evidence that opposition does not have ultimate authority. This truth is powerfully illustrated in the story of Daniel. Daniel did not lose his enemies. They did not change their minds. Their jealousy did not fade. Instead, it intensified. They manipulated power to trap him, confident that his faith would become his downfall. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, a place designed for public execution and private despair. What happened next changed everything. The lions did not touch him. Daniel did not fight. He did not escape. He remained. When morning came, the very people who expected his destruction became witnesses to his preservation. The king himself saw that Daniel's God had authority beyond human power. Daniel's enemies were not removed before the trial. They were exposed after it. The den became a table. The place of intended humiliation became a platform for honor. Daniel emerged not only alive, but elevated. His faith was no longer questioned. It was acknowledged publicly. This is the pattern David is pointing to. God does not always silence opposition immediately. Sometimes he uses it to reveal his protection more clearly. The presence of enemies does not negate blessing. It highlights it. When you are sustained, where you should have been destroyed, your life speaks louder than arguments ever could. The application is deeply practical. When you face opposition, rejection, or criticism, it does not mean you are failing. It may mean you are positioned for visible victory. You do not need to rush to defend yourself. You do not need to prove your worth. You are invited to sit, receive strength, and trust that provision will speak for itself. Being fed in the presence of enemies teaches patience. It teaches restraint. It teaches confidence rooted in something deeper than approval. You learn that success does not require universal agreement. It requires faithfulness. When God prepares the table, He assumes responsibility for the outcome. This is not passive living. It is grounded living. You remain engaged, but not consumed. You remain present, but not pressured. The battle does not define you. The table does. When you understand this, fear begins to loosen its grip. You stop measuring progress by resistance. You stop interpreting opposition as failure. Instead, you recognize it as context. God is not intimidated by who stands against you. He is not rushed by their presence. He prepares nourishment, clarity, and strength exactly where you are. Victory does not always look like escape. Sometimes it looks like composure. Sometimes it looks like peace under pressure. Sometimes it looks like quiet confidence while others watch, waiting for you to fall. The table is already prepared. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. And you are not surviving on scraps. You are being sustained on purpose, in full view of everything that once tried to stop you. When David says that goodness and mercy shall follow him, the image is far more aggressive than it first appears. In modern language, follow sounds gentle, almost passive, as if goodness and mercy are quietly walking a few steps behind. But the original meaning carries a much stronger force. It is not the language of companionship. It is the language of pursuit. The word implies chasing, hunting, and overtaking. David is saying that goodness and mercy are not waiting to see how he performs. They are not hesitating when he hesitates. They are actively moving toward him with speed and intention. Even when he turns the wrong way, they are still advancing. Grace is not reacting to his life. It is pursuing it. This reverses how many people experience faith. Most live as if they are the ones chasing God's favor, always trying to catch up, always feeling behind. David flips that belief upside down. He does not run after goodness and mercy. They run after him. His confidence does not come from perfection. It comes from pursuit. This truth becomes even more powerful when you consider moments of failure. When people fall, they often retreat inward. Shame convinces them to hide, to withdraw, to distance themselves from hope. They assume that grace slows down when they mess up. But David declares the opposite. Even when he stumbles, goodness and mercy accelerate. Failure does not cancel pursuit. It triggers it. Many people spend their lives running from themselves. They avoid looking at their past. They silence their regrets. They outrun their own pain by staying busy or distracted. But you cannot escape what follows you. The question is not whether something is pursuing you. The question is what it is. David understands that even when he runs in the wrong direction, he is not being chased by judgment alone. He is being chased by mercy. This does not excuse his mistakes. It redeems the aftermath. Mercy catches up not to condemn, but to restore. Goodness overtakes not to shame, but to realign. Living with this awareness changes everything. You stop interpreting your life through fear of falling short. You stop assuming that one mistake can undo everything. Instead, you begin to move with confidence rooted in grace. You make choices knowing that even when you misstep, you are not abandoned. This does not produce carelessness. It produces courage. When you know you are pursued by goodness, you take responsibility without being crushed by it. You face truth without hiding. You grow without pretending. The pressure to perform is replaced by the freedom to become. David's declaration is not about ignoring consequences. It is about refusing to let consequences define identity. Goodness and mercy do not erase the path you walked. They redeem it. They follow you through every season, every success, and every failure, refusing to let any moment have the final word. To live with this understanding is to walk forward without constantly looking over your shoulder. To trust that even behind you, grace is already at work. You are not chased by your past. You are pursued by mercy. And that pursuit does not slow down with time. It continues all the days of your life. Everything in Psalm 23 leads to this final realization. This psalm is not written as a request. It is written as a declaration. David is not asking God to become his shepherd. He is announcing that God already is. He is not hoping for protection. He is stating that protection is already in place. He is not pleading for provision. He is declaring that nothing essential will be lacking. Every line is spoken from a position of confidence, not desperation. This is the hidden secret that changes everything. Psalm 23 does not work as a passive reading. It was never meant to be whispered only in moments of weakness. It is a verbal stance, a declaration spoken into reality. David is not waiting for circumstances to change before he trusts God. He is trusting God before circumstances change. His words are not shaped by fear, they are shaped by conviction. This explains why Psalm 23 has endured through generations, cultures, and crises. It has been spoken at funerals, weddings, hospital bedsides, and battlefields, not because it is poetic, but because it is powerful. It reminds people who they belong to when everything else feels uncertain. It anchors identity when emotions collapse. It trains the soul to stand firm when life presses in. A declaration is different from a wish. A wish hopes something might happen. A declaration states what already is. David speaks as someone who knows where his life is held. He does not deny danger. He does not minimize pain. He simply refuses to let those things define reality. His declaration reshapes how he walks through every season. But there is another truth hidden here. Psalm 23 only carries power when it is lived, not just heard. David did not survive because he memorized these words. He survived because he stood on them. When lions came, when betrayal surrounded him, when valleys closed in, he lived as if the Lord truly was his shepherd. His trust was not theoretical. It was embodied. This is where many people stop short. They listen, they agree, they feel comforted, but they do not step into the life the psalm calls for. David did not treat Psalm 23 as something to revisit occasionally. He treated it as a framework for daily living. It shaped how he responded to fear. It shaped how he rested. It shaped how he faced enemies and failure. Moving from hearing to living requires intention. It means choosing to speak truth, even when emotions argue otherwise. It means resting when panic tells you to keep striving. It means trusting guidance when the path feels unclear. It means believing you are protected even when evidence seems thin. David lived Psalm 23 before it ever became famous. That is why it carries weight. This is the invitation now. Do not let these words remain familiar without becoming functional. Do not let them comfort you without transforming you. Psalm 23 was never meant to be admired from a distance. It was meant to be declared out loud and lived boldly. When you read it, do not read it as poetry. Read it as identity. When you speak it, do not speak it as hope. Speak it as truth. Let it shape how you walk into tomorrow. Let it define how you respond when fear appears. Let it remind you who is leading when the road feels uncertain. You are not hoping that God will be your shepherd. You are declaring that he already is. And when that truth moves from your lips into your life, Psalm 23 stops being something you read and becomes something you live. Now comes the moment where understanding must turn into action. Psalm 23 was never designed to stay silent on the page. It was written to be spoken. There is a reason David expressed it as a declaration rather than a thought. Words spoken out loud shape awareness, posture, and belief. When fear is loud, truth must be louder. The first action is simple, but it is not casual. Read Psalm 23 out loud. Not quickly, not mechanically. Read it slowly, intentionally, and with presence. Let your own ears hear what your mouth is declaring. This is not about superstition or ritual. It is about alignment. Truth trains the mind and steadies the heart. You are reminding yourself who is leading, who is providing, and who is protecting. The second action is application. A declaration without alignment becomes empty repetition. To apply Psalm 23 means choosing to live as if it is already true. When anxiety rises, pause and remember that you are being led. When exhaustion sets in, allow yourself to rest instead of striving. When opposition appears, trust that provision is already prepared. Application is not perfection, it is consistency. It is choosing trust again and again, even when emotions resist. The third action is declaration. Speak Psalm 23 over your life intentionally. Speak it over your finances when fear of lack appears. Speak it over your relationships when tension arises. Speak it over your health when uncertainty threatens peace. Speak it over your future when direction feels unclear. You are not trying to convince God. You are anchoring yourself. You are declaring alignment with what is already true. This is how the psalm becomes alive. It moves from comfort to courage. It moves from familiarity to authority. When you declare it regularly, it stops being something you turn to in crisis and becomes something that shapes how you walk every day. Now, if this message resonated with you, do not let it end here. Faith grows in community. Declaration becomes stronger when it is shared. I want to invite you to take one simple step right now. In the comments, write the words, "The Lord is my shepherd," not as a slogan, not as a trend, as your personal declaration. When you comment, you are not performing for others. You are standing publicly in truth. You are reminding yourself and others that fear does not have the final word. If this video helped you see Psalm 23 in a new way, share it with someone who needs reassurance, clarity, or strength right now. You never know who is walking through a valley quietly. If you want more content like this, subscribe so you can continue growing in understanding and confidence. This channel exists to help faith become lived reality, not just belief. Remember this as you move forward. You are not surviving by chance. You are not protected by luck. You are not guided by uncertainty. You are led by a shepherd who does not lose track of his sheep and does not lose battles. Go live like it.